Her voice was polite, but her tone froze the room. The morning air hung heavy in Eleanor's kitchen, infused with the faint scent of cinnamon and browned butter. She stood over the stove, ladling pancake batter onto the skillet with a slow, deliberate motion. The soft sizzle echoed in the quiet. Caleb had always loved pancakes on his birthday. She remembered the way he used to sneak one before the stack was done, grinning like a boy who'd just gotten away with something. Now the kitchen was still, as if it too had gone quiet in mourning. She moved without rush, set the table for two even though she knew only one plate would be used. A folded cloth napkin, mismatched mugs, syrup bottle already warmed. The rituals gave her something to hold on to, even if no one else would. The sound of the front door opening snapped her back into the moment. Footsteps, heels against tile, approached with a careful rhythm. Eleanor didn't look up until the voice came. "Smells nice." Jade stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Her blouse was crisp, makeup exact, but the warmth stopped at her collarbones. Her face held something unreadable. Composure stretched too tight. Eleanor smiled faintly, offering a seat with a gesture. Jade remained standing. "I just came to pick up the mail. I saw it was piling up again. I left it in the hallway basket," Eleanor replied, folding a pancake onto a plate. "Would you like some? It's Caleb's favorite." "Thought I'd..." "There's no room for extras now, Eleanor." The words were soft, almost respectful in tone, but the meaning landed like shattered glass. The spatula paused mid-air. Eleanor turned, slowly, to face her daughter-in-law. "Extras?" Jade looked away, adjusting her sleeve. "The house is full. Energy's been heavy. Grief. It's personal. I think it's best if we all start finding space for ourselves." A breeze fluttered the curtain by the sink, but the room felt airless. Eleanor placed the spatula down. "Space," she repeated quietly. "I see." They stood there, a dozen feet apart, but separated by miles. Silence unfolded between them, dense and awkward, full of everything unspoken. Eleanor reached for her mug and sat, steadying herself with both hands around the ceramic heat. Jade didn't fidget or apologize. She walked to the hallway, scooped the mail into her handbag, and turned back once, as if to say something, but her lips pressed shut. "Goodbye," she said finally, not warmly, not coldly, just conclusively. Then she was gone. The door clicked closed. Only then did Eleanor exhale. She sat still, staring at the plate she'd prepared for no one. After a long moment, she reached for her phone and typed, "Lorraine, I feel invisible." She stared at the words before hitting send. Her thumb hovered, but didn't hesitate. The reply didn't come right away. Lorraine was likely out walking. She always did that mid-mornings. Said it helped her organize her thoughts. Eleanor pushed the plate aside and wiped her hands on her apron. Then she opened the cupboard and removed a small wooden box, tucked behind the teacups. Inside, neatly arranged, were letters she'd written to Caleb in the months since his passing. Unsent, of course. Some were sealed. She added another. Not with words, but with one of the napkins she'd ironed just for today. She folded it slowly, delicately, and placed it inside. Her phone buzzed. Not Lorraine. The preview text stopped her breath. "Jade, your presence complicates things." Her hand stayed on the counter for balance. She read the message twice, not for clarity, but to absorb the sting. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was the beginning of something colder. "Jade sends a cold text. Your presence complicates things. I wasn't on the funeral program, like I never existed." Eleanor sat at her kitchen table the next morning, the same one that still bore the faint ring of Caleb's untouched syrup mug from the day before. She hadn't moved it. Something about the faint stickiness anchored her. Sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains, but her screen cast a colder light. Lorraine had texted a link. An article from the local paper's digital archive, in loving memory. Caleb Worthing. She clicked it without thinking. Instinct overriding dread. It loaded slowly, buffering as if time itself didn't want to hand her what was next. Then it appeared. There was his photo, bright-eyed, just like he'd looked before the illness stole his weight. Below, the program details: venue, pastor, order of service, music selections. Her eyes scanned frantically, searching for her name. Nowhere. Not even mother of the deceased. Her breath hitched. She reread it, convincing herself she must have missed it, that there'd been an error. But no, Eleanor Worthing did not exist. Not in that version of her son's farewell. Instead, under survived by was Jade's name. Alone. Not even Daniel. The mug in her hand trembled, and she set it down carefully, deliberately, like everything now needed to be done without cracks. She reached for her phone, opened her contacts and typed, Lorraine. Before she could tap call, a text came in from her instead. Some people rewrite the guest list when grief makes them editor-in-chief. Eleanor stared at the screen, unsure whether to cry or laugh. Maybe both. Lorraine always did have a strange way of holding a mirror up with humor, but this one stung. She didn't reply. Instead, she clicked open her email and began typing to an old name she hadn't touched in over a year. To Marcus Daniels. Subject: just thinking of Caleb. Hi Marcus. I hope you're well. I came across something today that made me think of the early spring BBQs Caleb used to host. I hope those memories bring you peace like they do me. Take care, Eleanor. She hit send, and for a moment, didn't feel like she was begging for acknowledgement, just opening a window. She sent a few more notes, short, quiet, personal, to people who'd been Caleb's constants. His lab partner from the neighbor who always brought extra burgers to their porch, people who'd meant something before everything got edited. Responses came quickly. Kind, thoughtful. One even attached an old photo of Caleb mid-laugh, holding a corgi in one arm, and a plate of ribs in the other. None of them mentioned Jade. The omission felt less cruel now, more like tacit understanding. That night, Eleanor opened her journal and stared at the first blank page in a week. She wrote slowly, if love lasts beyond breath, does place require permission? Am I still part of his story if I've been erased from the chapters? Then almost angrily, she added one more line, am I allowed to still belong? She capped the pen harder than she meant to, the click louder in the quiet of the room. A wind moved through the house, dry leaves scratching across the porch, like even the world wanted to shift something forward. She was brushing her teeth when the doorbell rang. At this hour, she checked the clock. 9:46 p.m., late, but not strange enough to call the police. She padded barefoot to the door, hesitating before unlocking it. No one stood there, just an envelope, cream-colored, no stamp, no return address. She picked it up carefully, the cardstock thick and expensive. Inside, a wedding invitation. Generic font, no names, just a time and place. Location: the Riverside Chapel. At the top, to Caleb Worthing's family. Family. That word again. The invitation smelled faintly of white roses and something floral. She couldn't place. She turned it over. Nothing else. She sat down with it, holding it loosely in her lap, as if waiting for the rest to arrive. A call, an explanation, anything. Instead, she flipped to the final line. Date, September 19. 3 weeks from today. The anniversary of her son's death. The date falls in 3 weeks. During the anniversary, they toasted his memory while erasing mine. The music drifted through the open windows of the Worthing house, before Eleanor even reached the end of the block. Soft jazz layered with gospel harmonies. Caleb's favorite blend. His faith celebration, Jade had called it, in the announcement Lorraine forwarded from a neighbor. Eleanor hadn't been invited. Not formally, not even informally. She had received a single line the day before, from Jade's number, sent without context. It's best if you don't come. No explanation. No room for questions. So Eleanor didn't go. She walked past the corner lot just after sunset, clutching her scarf tighter. Through the wide living room windows, she could see the soft glow of fairy lights strung across the ceiling, the flicker of votive candles, silhouettes of guests laughing and raising glasses. Dozens had come. She paused beneath a tree across the street, watching quietly. No one looked at. A laugh burst from somewhere inside, sharp, too loud. A man raised a glass. People clapped. She couldn't make out the words, but she imagined what they were saying, about Caleb's strength, his faith, how much he'd meant to the community, and still, not one of those lights inside was for her. Back home, Eleanor kicked off her shoes slowly, as though each foot weighed more than the other. She placed her scarf on its hook, her coat carefully beside it. She moved through her house deliberately, a woman not yet defeated, but undeniably dented. The silence here felt different from the one outside Jade's glowing house. This one held memory, not erasure. She made tea, hibiscus, and sat by the window with it. She didn't cry, but her throat ached as if she had. Her phone buzzed. Lorraine, did you see the guest count? Over 50, someone said. No mention of you. Eleanor didn't respond right away. A few minutes later, Lorraine wrote again. Do they know about the will? Eleanor stared at the question. It felt more like a challenge than a curiosity. She stood, walked to the file cabinet in her guest room, and pulled out the blue leather binder. It had her lawyer's name embossed on the front, initials in gold. She sat with it in her lap, running her fingers over the edge. Caleb's signature, her own, witnessed, notarized, finalized. It had all the right pieces. Everything in that document was hers to share, or not. She opened her email and typed quickly, to Lorraine, subject ready. I think it's time to share the will. She didn't sign it. Lorraine would know. Eleanor sipped the last of her tea, placed the cup in the sink without washing it, and walked to her bedroom. She didn't sleep, just sat on the edge of the bed for a long while, rereading old messages from Caleb, each one shorter than she remembered, but still filled with his humor, his gentleness. When the morning sun broke across her blinds, she wrote. By noon, Lorraine had already forwarded the updated contact list for Caleb's memorial fund, and suggested how best to send out the will's summary page. Eleanor felt a weight lift, not gone, but redistributed. She wasn't striking back. She was simply stepping forward, until she opened her phone. Jade had posted a photo. Her social media was private, but people still sent screenshots. This one came from a distant cousin in Florida, who hadn't spoken to Eleanor in years, but felt the need to let her know. In the image, the same celebration, the same lights and laughter, but in the foreground sat an armchair, not just any chair, her chair, the one Caleb had carried into Eleanor's sunroom on Mother's Day 5 years ago, insisting she have something real to sink into, the one he used to sit beside while she. Now it sat in Jade's living room, draped in a tapestry, a deep red brocade Eleanor had never seen before, covering it entirely. A caption read, "Where Spirit Rests, Where Legacy Lives." Eleanor stared at the screen. She could still feel the indent of her spine against that chair, now covered, now claimed. Jade posts a photo of Eleanor's favorite chair draped in tapestry. I handed her the will, with calm that touched like frost. Eleanor set out 3 cups of coffee black for Daniel, a splash of oat milk for herself, and chamomile for Jade, though she had no idea if Jade even drank tea anymore. It wasn't about the tea, it was about civility. The living room was quiet except for the occasional tick of the grandfather clock. Eleanor had dimmed the lights just enough to let the mid-morning sun carry the mood. She wore a navy cardigan, Caleb's favorite, on her, and a string of modest pearls that hadn't seen the light in years. Daniel arrived first. She let him in with a soft smile, noting the dark circles under his eyes. He hugged her gently, almost too gently, like grief had turned everyone into porcelain. Jade followed 10 minutes later, stepping into the room with that same composed rigidity Eleanor had grown used to. A blazer, perfect hair, not a strand out of place. She didn't hug. She nodded. "We won't take much of your time," Eleanor said, motioning for them to sit. "I just wanted to share something. It's time." Daniel sat across from her, hands folded tightly in his lap. Jade lingered by the bookshelf, arms crossed, scanning the room as though looking for a hidden microphone. Only when Eleanor reached beneath the coffee table and pulled out the leather binder did Jade's attention snap fully into place. "I asked Thornton to join us," Eleanor added, gesturing toward the quiet man in the corner chair, her lawyer. He offered a polite nod, his tablet open but untouched. Eleanor placed the binder on the table between them. "This is Caleb's final will." Jade raised an eyebrow, but didn't speak. Daniel leaned forward slightly, confusion tightening his brow. Eleanor opened the binder, turned the pages carefully, and slid it toward Jade. Would you mind reading this section aloud? The room hushed as Jade took the document. Her fingers were steady, but her shoulders betrayed tension tightened too high. She began, voice firm. To my beloved mother Eleanor Worthing, I leave all personal effects, including letters, furniture, and mementos stored within my childhood home. Daniel blinked. Jade paused, then kept going. A charitable fund shall be established in my name. The executor will ensure its use for causes aligned with my expressed values. She flipped the page, hesitated. No mention of her. No to my wife Jade. No estate allocation. No honorary trust. The room tightened like a held breath. Daniel shifted in his seat. Jade's fingers clenched the edge of the page. The only sound was the faint hum of the heater clicking on. Eleanor waited a beat before speaking, her voice low. Even, there's more, she said. Thornton leaned forward. Per Caleb's instruction and Eleanor's role as co-author of the fund's structure, an addendum was added. It's conditional. Jade looked up sharply. Conditional? Yes. Eleanor said gently. The fund will be accessible to you, under specific terms. Jade's composure slipped, just a crack at the edge of her mouth. What terms? Eleanor didn't answer right away. She folded her hands over her knee, gaze unwavering. I'm not punishing you, she said softly, but I am protecting what Caleb stood for. The fund is meant to reflect love, not revision. Daniel looked between them, still silent, but deeply alert now. Jade's jaw tightened. So this is leverage? Some morality clause? No, Eleanor said and smiled cool, steady. It's clarity. The room fell still again. A frost had settled, not one of malice, but of long-awaited boundary. Jade looked back down at the will, and for the first time, her expression faltered. Her voice dropped, nearly inaudible. What conditions? Jade breathes. What condition? I didn't punish her, just offered dignity to mine. Eleanor exhaled slowly, as if steadying herself for a walk across ice. There are 4 conditions, she said, folding her hands neatly in her lap. Jade crossed her arms tighter. Go on. Thornton adjusted his glasses, poised but silent. First, Eleanor began, voice calm, you must acknowledge Caleb's family, his whole family, in any public reference tied to the fund. No more erasing of names, not mine, not Daniel's. Jade blinked, once, hard. Second, Eleanor continued, you will participate in at least one facilitated conversation with me, with Daniel if he chooses, a space where accountability is prioritized over apology. Daniel looked down, tracing the rim of his Third, Eleanor said, eyes on Jade. Any public event tied to Caleb's memory must extend an open invitation to all immediate family. No more surprise galas, no invisible chairs. Jade's lips pressed tight. And lastly, Eleanor finished, you must meet with a counselor, a professional, just once. I'm not asking for transformation, only the willingness to look inward. Silence. Jade stared at her, the tendons in her jaw working under skin that looked suddenly too pale. You think I need therapy because I didn't put your name on a flyer? I think you need it, Eleanor said, still gentle, because my son died, and everything since has been rewritten like I didn't matter. That doesn't come from grief alone. Jade scoffed, too quick. I didn't intend to exclude anyone. Intent, Eleanor said softly, isn't action. The phrase hung in the room like incense, bitter and slow to fade. Daniel shifted in his chair, arms folded across his chest now, his gaze somewhere between them. Jade turned to him. You're just going to sit there. I'm listening, he said. Not warm, not cold, just factual. Jade's eyes flicked to Thornton. And if I say no to these conditions? Thornton didn't flinch. Then per the codicil, the fund remains fully under Eleanor's trusteeship, permanently. Jade stood abruptly. So I either dance to your script, or I'm cut out entirely. No, Eleanor said, her voice firm now, rising slightly. You choose your place in Caleb's memory. I simply chose not to make it automatic. The room stilled again. Then, Lorraine entered from the hallway with a small handheld recorder, clicking it off. I hope you don't mind, she said, eyes on Eleanor. You asked me to make sure everything was documented. I didn't want this moment lost in opinion. Eleanor nodded faintly. Jade looked rattled, but said nothing. I'll think about it, Jade muttered, reaching for her bag. That's all I ever hoped.
Eleanor said quietly. Jade didn't answer. She moved toward the door, pausing as if she wanted to slam it, but thought better of. Instead, she walked out like a storm holding back its rain. The silence after she left was deeper than before. Daniel finally looked up. You meant every word. I did, Eleanor said. And I mean to protect every inch of him that's left. Daniel nodded once.
Thornton stood, closing the binder. I'll circulate the official terms to her counsel by end of day. Lorraine sat beside Eleanor and took her hand. That chair she covered? It just became her second most uncomfortable seat. Eleanor smiled, faint and tired. Then her phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. Short and clinical. This is regarding Ms. Worthing's conditional clause. We believe it constitutes undue pressure. We'll be disputing legality. She stared at the screen, pulse steady but sharp now. Jade hadn't waited long. Eleanor's phone buzzes. Jade's lawyer responds. Dispute on clause legality. She challenged my terms, so I documented our truths. The scent of fresh legal paper filled Thornton's office. A strange blend of ink and linen fibers, and something colder formality. Eleanor sat across from him, her back straight, pearl necklace still clasped neatly at her throat. She hadn't worn it for decades before this month. Now it felt like armor. Thornton tapped his pen once, then again, then laid it flat. She's retained Haskins and Moyle, he said. Boutique aggressive. Her lawyer calls the clause emotionally coercive. They're claiming undue influence. Predictable but not baseless. Eleanor folded her hands in her lap. I didn't draft that clause out of spite. No, Thornton agreed, but proving that isn't just about truth, it's about record. I've kept records, Eleanor said, and now we organize them. Lorraine arrived shortly after, carrying a box of labeled manila folders, journals, emails, screenshots, handwritten letters Caleb had mailed from college, printouts of Jade's gala posts, copies of the funeral program. Each one spoke in a different voice, but they told the same story. You kept all of this? Thornton asked, thumbing through a file marked emotional timeline. Post Caleb. I don't throw away people I love, Eleanor replied. He nodded, understanding that wasn't sarcasm, just fact. By late afternoon, Daniel arrived, quiet, jacket slung over his shoulder, face unreadable. He didn't speak as he set his phone down, then picked up one of the letters. It was addressed to him in Caleb's handwriting. He didn't open it, just held it. I want to be on record, he finally said, looking at Eleanor. I'll testify, if it comes to that. She nodded once, slow. Thank you. They worked late. Thornton scanning. Lorraine cataloging. Eleanor verifying data. The room buzzed with the kind of focused silence only grief and purpose can create. Then a new email arrived. Subject, counter proposal. Worthing Legacy Fund. Thornton opened it with a practiced hand. Read aloud. Client requests shared oversight of fund disbursement. 2 signatures mandatory. Eleanor Worthing and Jade Worthing. Additionally, client seeks authority to select charitable recipients. Eleanor's stomach tightened, but her face didn't change. She wants equal control, Lorraine said flatly. After ghosting your name out of a funeral? Not just control, Daniel said. Curation. Power to reshape Caleb's memory on her terms. Thornton looked up. We reject. Executor authority is clear. Your rights as grantor are sound. Her name was absent from the will. You are within legal and ethical bounds. Eleanor said nothing for a long moment. Then she stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city glowed under the tired gold of evening. She wants to curate, Eleanor said. I just want to protect. That's the difference. Behind her, Lorraine slid a document across the table. Sign this. It's the reply with your full refusal and attached evidence summary. Eleanor returned to the table, took the pen in hand. She paused. I never thought it would be like this, she said softly. That I'd have to prove I loved him, that I still love him. You're not proving that, Lorraine said, voice softening. You're protecting it. Eleanor signed. The pen barely made a sound. An hour later, as Thornton walked them out, His assistant appeared in the hallway, holding a single-page envelope with the court's seal pressed at the corner. Just came through. Rush filing. He handed it to Thornton. Thornton opened it, skimmed, then passed it silently to Eleanor. In red, a Worthing Estate probate hearing scheduled date, 1 week from today. Location District Room B. Eleanor stared at the date. So soon, so final. Probate court issues an official hearing notice, dated in 1 week. She organized a gala. I lit a candle. The flyer arrived folded inside a community bulletin, thick paper professionally designed, Caleb's face printed above an ornate banner, the Worthing Legacy Gala, an evening of faith, memory, and light. Eleanor stared at it over her morning toast, the image smiling up at her like a man who didn't know his memory was being portioned out like merchandise. No invite, no acknowledgement. The program listed speakers, musical guests, a silent auction. Proceeds to benefit the Caleb Worthing Foundation, co-founded by Jade Worthing. Not a single mention of Eleanor. She folded the flyer in half, then again, then once more, until it was small enough to disappear inside the drawer beside her stove. That same drawer held a lighter, a pair of glasses she no longer used, and a single candle, white, unscented. She pulled the candle out and placed it in the front window. At exactly 7:00 p.m., the hour listed for the gala's opening remarks, she lit. The flame wavered for a moment, then steadied. She watched it catch and hold, the wick blackening slowly. She sat in silence with it for a few minutes before reaching for her phone. She didn't call anyone. Instead, she opened the voice memo app and hit "Hi, sweetheart." She began softly. The words came in slow, halting waves. "I imagine you'd be wearing that navy shirt tonight. The one that made you look so grown when you first wore it to graduation. I still have it here. You'd probably be annoyed at all the speech. You never liked being made a symbol." She paused, a small breath catching. "They're gathering now. I hope you know that I'm here too. Not dressed up, not public, but here, remembering you in the way we always did. Quietly, intentionally." Another pause. "I miss you, not just in the grief kind of way. I miss you in the Tuesday morning need to ask you a question kind of way. The should we watch that documentary again way." She smiled, then hit stop. The file saved automatically. Caleb, August 12. A knock sounded. 3 slow taps. She opened the door to find Lorraine. No coat, no handbag, just a small bouquet of lavender and eucalyptus in hand. "I figured you weren't going," she said gently, stepping inside. Eleanor didn't respond. She didn't need to. They stood together by the window, the candle flickering between them. Lorraine placed the bouquet beside it and said nothing. Some things didn't need narration. Later that night, Eleanor opened her email. 5 new messages, 2 from distant cousins, 1 from her late husband's sister, who rarely wrote, all expressing the same quiet ache. "I wish I'd seen you there. He wouldn't have wanted this silence between you two. I thought you had been invited. I'm sorry." Each word built something she hadn't expected, validation without bitterness. The 4th message came from an old friend of Caleb's from high school. A simple subject line, "Thank you." Inside, only 1 sentence, "I saw your candle from the sidewalk." Eleanor replied with just 2 words, "He glowed." She closed the laptop, pulled the shawl tighter around her shoulders, and let the evening wash over her. She felt something quiet settle inside, not peace, not yet, but steady. Then, just before she turned off her phone for the night, 1 last message appeared. No name, just a number she didn't recognize. The message read, "Your chair was empty at the gala toast." No punctuation, no context, but she knew exactly what it meant. A message arrives. "Your chair was empty at the gala toast. They erased me from their headlines, but I appeared in footnotes." Eleanor stood at the kitchen counter, stirring sugar into her tea while the local paper's website loaded on her laptop. Lorraine had sent the link that morning, with only 3 words, "Read with care." The article's headline was bold, "A Son Remembered. Caleb Worthing's Legacy Fund Gala raises $58,000. Below it, a glossy photo of Jade beaming in a navy gown Eleanor had never seen before. Her hand rested on the back of a chair. The chair, Eleanor recognized the curve of its arm immediately, even under the crimson tapestry. She scrolled down. eyes moving faster than her breath. Hosted by the Caleb Worthing Foundation's founder and widow, Jade Worthing, the gala brought together over 50 guests. No mention of Daniel, no mention of Eleanor, no quote, no photograph, no name. She closed the browser, set the cup down, and stepped away. The room felt off-kilter, like gravity had shifted by a few degrees. A few hours later, her landline rang, one of the few calls that still came through that way. A young voice on the other end, polite, professional. "Mrs. Worthing, I'm with the Herald. We're preparing a longer feature on the Foundation's origins, and we've been told you were foundational. Would you be willing to comment?" Eleanor let the silence grow between them until it pressed. "I won't correct someone else's version," she said finally. "But I'll write my own." She ended the call gently. Later that day, Lorraine appeared with a laptop and a sense of purpose. "We're drafting a family statement," she announced, not waiting for permission. "It doesn't go in a paper. It doesn't go viral. It goes where truth needs to go." They sat at the dining table, Lorraine typing, Eleanor dictating, Daniel listening quietly on speaker from work. The language was careful. No accusations, no melodrama, just presence. Caleb Worthing, son of Eleanor and brother of Daniel, lived a life not just of public conviction, but private gentleness. The family has chosen to honor his legacy in ways that reflect that full spirit, whether or not those ways receive a headline. Daniel offered to send it. "I know who to include," he said. "The people who'll actually read it." By evening the email had gone out. No social media blast. No hashtags, just hearts addressed by name. Eleanor sat on the porch with a blanket and her tea, the laptop closed now. The candle in the window was unlit, but its scent still hung faintly in the air, a memory more than a flame. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up, expecting Lorraine. Instead, it was Marcus. She hadn't spoken to him in months. Caleb's college roommate, his best man, the one who'd always sent birthday cards with dry, sarcastic jokes, scribbled inside. She answered. "Hi," he said. "I wasn't sure if I should call." "You're here now," she said calmly. He exhaled. "I've been replaying something from the gala." Eleanor's breath caught, but she didn't interrupt. They had everyone raise a glass at the end. "Toast to Caleb's living spirit," Jade said. She gestured toward that chair. "Yours, I think." Said it symbolized guidance and legacy. Eleanor closed her eyes. Marcus continued. But the weirdest thing happened. Mid-toast, the chair collapsed. Collapsed, leg buckled like someone had been leaning too hard on what wasn't theirs. He paused. "I don't believe in omens. But that felt like something snapping into place." Eleanor said nothing. She didn't need to. "Caleb's friend Marcus calls unexpectedly. During your chair's toast, it collapsed. He spoke my name, when no one else would." Marcus arrived with a canvas messenger bag slung over one shoulder, and an expression Eleanor hadn't seen on a man in years. Nervous, but sure of his purpose. He stood on her porch, shifting from foot to foot, until she opened the door. "I brought receipts," he said, attempting a half smile. "And not the kind you fold up in your wallet and forget for tax season." Eleanor stepped aside to let him in. The house smelled faintly of eucalyptus and candle wax. The same quiet stillness greeted him that had always made Caleb say, "Mom's house has its own thermostat for grief." They sat in the sunroom, Eleanor's favorite space, the one the chair had come from. The indentation where it used to sit was still visible in the carpet. Marcus's gaze fell to it, then quickly back to her. "I should have called sooner," he said, pulling out his phone and unlocking it. "But I thought staying neutral was the best way to honor both of you." Eleanor poured him tea without comment. "Turns out," Marcus continued, swiping through his messages, "neutrality's just another way of saying silence when it counts." He handed her the phone. Text messages scrolled upward, Jade's name at the top. A thread of requests and instructions. "Please avoid emphasizing Eleanor's presence in Caleb's college years. Let's keep mentions of his mom minimal. Too many emotions to manage publicly. Daniel's still on the list, but let's not spotlight him." Eleanor scrolled slowly. Her thumb paused on one message. "We need this to reflect his future, not the past. Some family dynamics are just distracting." She didn't flinch. Marcus looked down. "She asked me to filter my memory. I tried to find the balance, but it always felt like whittling someone down, until they no longer looked like themselves." Eleanor handed the phone back. "You did what you could. Until now."
Marcus reached into his bag and pulled out a small envelope. It was taped, resealed, then taped again. She peeled it open carefully and slid out a torn checklist, familiar font, partially redacted by pen. Jade emailed this to me after the funeral, Marcus said. Said it was the draft for core messaging. I shredded it after reading, but I couldn't throw it away. Eleanor held the pieces like scripture. At the top, talking points. Avoid mother, Daniel. Any childhood friends outside post-marriage circle. Beneath it, one line scribbled in blue ink. No extra emotional variables. Keep tone professional. Just then, footsteps approached. Daniel stepped into the doorway, holding his phone. I heard that last part, he said, not sheepish. I came early for dinner, and caught Marcus's voicemail to you. His voice was tight, but clear. She called us variable. Eleanor looked at him gently, but Marcus stepped in. Caleb was never meant to be curated. He was built from all of you, from taco nights, and school projects, and 3 a.m. movie marathons on your porch. Daniel sat down, visibly shaken but grateful. Eleanor stood, crossed to her sideboard, and pulled out her digital recorder. She pressed play. Caleb's voice filled the room. An old birthday voicemail. Hey Mom, I just wanted to say you made me who I am. Every decent part of me comes from you. I hope someday people remember that, even if I forget to say it as often as I should. The message ended. The silence that followed didn't ache. It steadied. Marcus looked her in the eye. You belong in this story. Your son made that clear. Eleanor nodded once. Her phone buzzed. A string of notifications from the family thread Daniel had quietly started hours ago with the statement Lorraine helped write. Cousins, friends, a few in-laws, each message a short apology, or a memory, or a quiet expression of support. Eleanor's hand trembled, but not from doubt, from confirmation. She turned to Lorraine, who had arrived halfway through the playback and was watching from the hallway. Gather everyone, Eleanor said, voice steady. She picked up the recorder, her thumb hovering over the red button. Let's record honesty tonight. Eleanor turns to Lorraine and says, gather everyone. Let's record honesty tonight. They expected peace, but got a reckoning. Eleanor chose a round table, deliberate. She'd told Lorraine, no heads, no corners, just a circle where no one could hide behind placement. She lit 3 candles, one for memory, one for truth, and one for the future she hadn't entirely given up on. The roast was simple. Her linen napkins were folded crisp, and the air carried the faintest scent of rosemary. Daniel arrived first, shoulders still tense but eyes clearer than she'd seen them in weeks. Lorraine followed, humming some half-forgotten jazz tune, as she placed a plum tart on the sideboard. Then Marcus, and then 10 minutes late, Jade. She wore gray, not morning black, not defiant red, just gray. Her eyes flicked across the room, registering the round table, the others, the empty seat she was expected to fill. Thanks for coming, Eleanor said gently. No sharpness, no smile. Dinner began in near silence. Small clinks of cutlery. Lorraine commented on the wine. Marcus made a soft joke about rosemary, reminding him of college dorm potpourri gone wrong. Daniel chuckled. Jade remained still. Then came dessert. Eleanor placed slices of tart on each plate, but didn't sit. Instead, she walked to the sideboard and lifted the recorder. She held it for a moment before pressing play. Marcus's voice, clear and unembellished, echoed through the room. Talking points. Avoid mother, Daniel. Any childhood friends outside post-marriage circle. No extra emotional variables. Keep tone professional. Silent. Jade's fork clinked against her plate. She didn't look up. I thought you were oblivious, she said finally, eyes on the tart. Eleanor sat back down. You thought I was convenient to forget. Jade met her gaze now, and for the first time didn't blink. I thought it was easier than explaining everything to everyone. I thought you'd stay quiet. Daniel exhaled harshly through his nose and rubbed at his eyes. He turned toward Jade, voice hoarse. He loved her. Our brother. He loved her. And she wasn't even named in your speech. Jade's lip trembled. I didn't know how to hold all of it. My grief. Your grief. The expectations. The anger. I just wanted to make something clean. Clean. Marcus said, sharp. Caleb wasn't clean. He was messy and loyal, and loved 3-day-old lasagna and leaving clothes in your dryer. He was real. You edited that out. Jade's shoulders slumped. I thought she didn't want to be involved. Lorraine laughed low. You don't post someone's favorite chair with a tapestry and call it inclusion. That's costume. Silence settled again, thicker now. Jade reached into her bag slowly, and pulled out a folded paper. She laid it on the table, and smoothed the creases. I've been going through everything lately. Emails, documents, the will. This, she tapped the page gently. This is what triggered the clause, isn't it? Eleanor looked down. It was a screenshot, a reposted version of Jade's gala caption, one that referred to herself as the singular vessel of Caleb's legacy. Singular. Eleanor's throat tightened, but she nodded once. Yes, Jade didn't cry exactly, but something in her cracked. Her hands trembled slightly. She folded the paper again, not to conceal it, but like someone acknowledging a weight they'd finally stopped denying. She looked around the table at Daniel, at Marcus, at Lorraine, and finally at Eleanor. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. Eleanor leaned forward, voice quiet, but clear. Then start with listening. Jade nodded, slowly. The candlelight reflected in her eyes like a storm threatening to calm. Jade unfolds printed page, and says this triggered her claw. Her tears didn't nullify my terms, they initiated them. The next morning, Eleanor was folding napkins when the email came through. No subject line, just one of those legal forward chains stacked with case numbers and initial. Thornton's name appeared 3 lines down, followed by a message flagged high important.
She opened it. Jade Worthing's counsel asserts Eleanor's family statement circulated last week constitutes a public rebuke, violating clause condition 3. Review attached. She didn't blink, just reached for her reading glasses and clicked the PDF. Clause 3. No public representation or denigration of any party involved in the legacy fund without mutual consent. It was a stretch, but it was written in ink. She forwarded the email to Lorraine and Daniel with a single line, "It begins." 2 hours later they were gathered again. Eleanor's dining table now cluttered with open laptops, legal pads and coffee mugs gone cold. Lorraine read aloud from the clause. Daniel paced behind the chairs. Thornton joined by video. His background blurred, but his tone crisp. "She's grasping," he said. The statement didn't mention her name. No direct quote. But emotionally it was a quiet thunderclap. Enough that her lawyers can argue intent. Eleanor sat still, eyes calm. Jade had texted that morning. Not a call, just one sentence. "I didn't mean for this to turn legal again. Intent again. That ghost of a defense." "She's trying," Daniel said softly, arms crossed. "She's really trying. She's also maneuvering," Lorraine added. "Those don't cancel each other out." Silence settled. Then Eleanor spoke. "If her apology had come with action, not edits, we wouldn't be here." Thornton nodded. "We'll let the court decide, but we respond, and we hold." He tapped his pen twice before continuing. "This may trigger immediate probate review, which means..." The phone buzzed on the table. Lorraine answered it. Short pause. She looked up. "That was the clerk's office," she said. "They're accelerating the calendar." Thornton's voice returned, low and definitive. "Prepare for court. Emergency hearing. 48 hours. Daniel dropped into a chair, head in hands. "God." Lorraine took Eleanor's hand beneath the table. "Are you okay?" "I'm still here," Eleanor said. That night, another email arrived. Jade had submitted her formal statement to the court, an apology, but one threaded with justification. She included screenshots of the family message thread, quotes from the statement Lorraine drafted, and Caleb's voicemail, only the final lines. "I hope someday people remember that." Omission again. Lorraine shook her head. Even in apology she edits. Eleanor didn't speak. She opened a drawer instead. From it she pulled out the original full voicemail Caleb had left her, played it again, this time aloud, so even the silence would hear. "Every decent part of me comes from you." She pressed stop. The house was still. Not tense, not fragile, but braced. Then her phone lit up with a new notification. From Thornton. Subject line, "Emergency hearing confirmed. District Room A. Thursday, 9:30 a.m. Eleanor stared at the time, the place. This wasn't about chairs anymore. It was about the floor they all stood on. Eleanor receives notice. Emergency hearing scheduled in 2 days. They walked into courtroom territory. I walked in with evidence. Eleanor arrived at Thornton's office with a sense of quiet readiness, like a woman dressing not for battle but for weather, predictable in its chill, unforgiving in its silence. Lorraine was already inside, stacking manila folders into a long, clean arc across the table, labels in thick marker, voice memos, legal codicils, obits, chair gala, family chain. Thornton looked up and smiled, respectful but taut. Morning, let's get this tidy. He gestured for Eleanor to sit. A pot of Earl Grey was already waiting beside her. Black, strong, unspoken understanding brewed into it. They began sorting through the evidence bundle. First came the digital audio files. Caleb's voicemail. Then the gala toast photo with the collapsed chair framed beside a witness affidavit from Marcus. Screenshots of Jade's messages to Marcus. The checklist. The shredded printout now reconstructed and scanned. Then the voice memo Eleanor had recorded to Caleb. I'm submitting it, she said, steady. Thornton blinked. It's deeply personal. It's deeply accurate. He nodded once and added it to the USB. Lorraine slid over a folder with her handwriting on the tab. Family responses. All verified. No one knew Eleanor had been excluded until they saw it unfold. Daniel arrived next, wearing a navy jacket Eleanor didn't recognize. His hair combed flat, tie loose. A folder tucked under his arm. He sat beside Eleanor, quiet for a moment, then turned to her. I'm ready to testify. I want the court to know what Caleb wanted, not just what's been written since. She laid her hand over his. Nothing said. Nothing needed. By afternoon, Thornton reviewed the checklist a final time. Judge Ambrose has a sharp ear for motive. Don't chase Jade's emotion. Stay with the facts. Her intentions are her own. Yours are now on record. Eleanor nodded. The next morning, they arrived early at the courthouse. District Room A. It wasn't as grand as television, wood paneling, slightly scratched pew-like benches, a humming air vent in the ceiling. Still, it carried its own kind of solemnity. Lorraine guided Eleanor gently toward the front. They passed Jade seated alone, head bowed, blazer too bright for the room. Her lawyer leaned over whispering to her, calm but clearly rehearsing. Eleanor took her seat next to Thornton. Daniel sat directly behind her. Marcus and Lorraine on either side, a quiet triangle of presence. She breathed in deeply. The scent of wax and paper and unspoken truths filled the air. Then the bailiff called, all rise. The judge entered, female, mid-50s, face neutral but alert. Her robe swept the floor behind her like a second silence. They sat. The judge looked down at her notes. Before we proceed to opening statements, I need a clarification, she said. She looked directly at Eleanor. Mrs. Irving, do you acknowledge Condition 3 in the will, as binding and understand the implications of its enforcement? The room froze. Lorraine's breath caught. Daniel leaned forward. Jade twisted in her seat. Eleanor's heart beat steady. Steadier than it had in months. She lifted her chin, hands folded gently on the desk before her. Yes, she said, voice clear and low. I do. The judge asks, do you acknowledge Condition 3 in the will? Eleanor nods. The judge looked at every page and at us, not persuaded by charm. The courtroom settled into stillness like a held breath. Judge Ambrose adjusted her glasses and gave a small nod toward the plaintiff's table. Proceed. Thornton stood, unhurried, unflinching. Your Honor, we present this not as a vendetta but as evidence of intent, of omission, of memory edited without consent. He clicked the remote. The first image appeared on the courtroom screen, the gala flyer, Jade smiling beside the tapestry-draped chair. Then came the email thread between her and Marcus, the checklist, the text advising to avoid mention of Caleb's mother. Eleanor sat steady through it all. No glares, no smiles, just presence. Next, Thornton played the voicemail. Caleb's voice filled the courtroom, warm, unfiltered. Hey Mom, I just wanted to say you made me who I am. Every decent part of me comes from you. not a cough in the room. Judge Ambrose tilted her head, watching Eleanor then Jade, then nodded to Thornton. Continue. Daniel rose next. He spoke without notes. My brother loved deeply. He didn't separate people into public and private. He'd be horrified at what's been curated. He held up a letter in Caleb's handwriting. He sent this to me a week before the diagnosis. Said, if I go early, tell Mom she gave me the blueprint for everything I ever did right. Jade's lawyer stood suddenly. Your Honor, we object to the audio and personal letters as prejudicial. Overruled, Judge Ambrose said without a beat. Continue. Daniel returned to his seat, jaw tight. The judge leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Worthing, she said, addressing Eleanor, any final statements before I invite rebuttal? Eleanor stood, calm, unshaking. I've never fought for control, she began. I've fought for recognition. My son's legacy isn't a brand, it's a life threaded through mine, through Daniel's, through every person he left better than he found. She glanced at Jade, brief, but not unkind. Loss doesn't erase legacy, and it should never erase respect. She sat. The judge turned to Jade. Response. Jade stood slowly, her hands gripped the sides of the podium. The color had drained from her face. I didn't mean to erase anyone, she said, voice unsteady. I was trying to protect Caleb's image, to keep the fund clean, focused. Judge Ambrose lifted a hand. Miss Worthing, do you understand that your efforts not only excluded immediate family but were documented as deliberate edits? Jade nodded, but the tears had started now. Not performative, messy, raw. I just didn't want him to be remembered through division. You created the division, the judge said, voice even, and now you must stand in it. Jade lowered her gaze. Her lawyer whispered something, but she didn't respond. The judge leaned back, expression unreadable. Then she closed the folder in front of her. I've heard enough for today. A ripple of quiet moved through the courtroom. I will review all material tonight, she said. We'll reconvene at 9 a.m. tomorrow. At that time I'll issue my ruling on the conditions enforcement and determine the permanent structure of the Worthing Legacy Fund. She stood. Court is adjourned until morning. The gavel struck. Everyone rose. Eleanor exhaled, slow and full, for the first time in what felt like days. Lorraine took her hand. Daniel put a hand on her shoulder. Marcus offered a tired smile. Jade remained in her seat, head bowed, lips pressed together like she was afraid anything she said now might be too late. The judge adjourns for closing, verdict expected shortly. I didn't reclaim wealth. I reclaimed truth. The courtroom was quieter than the day before, less tension, more inevitability. The kind of stillness that came after a wave crested, and all that remained was what it left behind. Eleanor sat in the same seat, hands resting lightly on the edge of the table. Thornton whispered to her now and then, but mostly let the silence work in her favor. Lorraine beside her held a notebook in her lap, pen stilled between her fingers. Jade entered last. Less polished today, no blaze. Her lawyer walked beside her, lips pressed thin, carrying a brief that now seemed small compared to what had already been said. Judge Ambrose returned promptly at 9. Her robe flowed less like fabric and more like gravity. She settled into her seat, pulled her reading glasses into place, and gave a single nod. We'll begin with closing remarks. Thornton stood, hands clasped behind his back. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. This case is not about the financial worth of a fund. It is about the moral weight of memory. My client did not seek exclusion or punishment. She asked for acknowledgement. She asked for clarity. The will supported that, and the evidence shows consistent attempts, documented, repeated, to erase her from her son's narrative. He stepped back without flourish. Jade's attorney rose next. Your Honor, while we acknowledge missteps and emotion-driven decisions by my client, we argue that the intent was never malicious. The public statement shared by Mrs. Worthing's family presented its own narrative, one that influenced perception. He paced once, slow and methodical. Our concern is that enforcing the clause to its fullest extent would leave Mrs. Jade Worthing with no role in a foundation that bears her husband's name, a man she loved deeply. He returned to his seat, exhaling with weight.
Judge Ambrose turned to Eleanor. Mrs. Worthing, do you have anything further you wish to add? Eleanor stood. She did not raise her voice. She didn't even look at Jade. I'm not asking for her removal, she said. I'm asking for my son's memory to include the truth. That he didn't spring from nowhere. That the people who built him aren't replaced by silence because grief found another mouthpiece. She turned to the judge fully now. If the clause is meant to protect Caleb's spirit, then I ask that you honor it with its full meaning. Let the fund reflect every part of him, not just the part that photographs well. She sat. Daniel leaned forward behind her and gave her hand a light squeeze. A small nod passed between them, familial, unspoken, real. Judge Ambrose opened the folder in front of her and flipped through several documents. Then she paused, expression shifting slightly. There's one more element that requires review. She removed a second folder from beneath the first. This, she said, holding up a notarized document, is an overlooked codicil, tucked into the final addendum Caleb Worthing filed with his attorney before his death. It was not presented initially because its conditions were dependent on a triggering event. She looked squarely at Jade. That event has now occurred. Jade's face stiffened. Her lawyer leaned toward her, whispering urgent. The codicil states, Judge Ambrose continued, that in the event of any direct violation of Condition 3 specifically, the exclusion or misrepresentation of family and public-facing materials, full trusteeship of the legacy fund, reverts solely to Eleanor Worthing. A breath hitched somewhere in the back row. Thornton blinked once but said nothing. Jade's lawyer stood, almost panicked. Your Honor, we were not made aware of. I've reviewed its authenticity, Judge Ambrose said, cutting him off gently but firmly. It's valid. It's binding. She looked down once more, flipping the final page, then closed the file with both hands. I will issue the final ruling tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. The courtroom didn't move. No shuffle of papers, no clearing of throats. Eleanor didn't exhale. Not yet. The room had heard truth. Tomorrow it would decide what to do with it. Judge declares, I will issue final ruling tomorrow morning. No applause needed. Peace was my greatest inheritance. Morning light filtered through courtroom windows like a benediction. Eleanor sat as Judge Ambrose took the bench once more. The air buzzed with unspoken finality. After reviewing all submitted documents, the court finds that Condition 3 was materially breached, the judge declared, voice steady. Accordingly, pursuant to the codicil dated July 23, the full trusteeship of the Caleb Worthing Legacy Fund reverts to Eleanor Worthing. Jade Worthing does not meet the conditions and therefore receives no portion. A hush fell. Across the table, Eleanor exhaled. It wasn't relief, just quiet resolution. Daniel stood slowly, eyes bright. He approached Eleanor and offered a brief tight embrace behind her chair. The judge continued. This court emphasizes the importance of preserving both legacy and dignity. Miss Worthing is confirmed as executor and sole trustee. She folded her hands. Court adjourned. Murmurs filled the room. Jade's face was pale. Her lawyer's lips parted in disbelief. Eleanor packed her folder slowly. Thornton gave a reserved nod. Lorraine reached over and squeezed her hand. Marcus stood, offering a soft smile. Outside the courtroom, the sun was warmer. Like the law's weight had tilted gravity back to right. Back at Eleanor's home, the blue leather binder lay unopened on her kitchen table. She made tea as she didn't ask for applause. She'd asked for truth and inherited peace. Daniel joined her quietly, carrying 2 mugs. They sat side by side, neither needing to speak. After a moment he placed a hand lightly on hers. He heard it all, Mom? He really did. Eleanor nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks this time, but not from loss, from something steadier. Lorraine entered carrying a brown envelope marked Legacy Fund Brand Guide. We've drafted a new mission statement, rooted in kindness, memory, and inclusion. Eleanor opened it. Inside were pages, updated language, logos honoring Caleb's full story, clear acknowledgments of Eleanor and Daniel's roles, a shared fund for charitable giving tied to causes he cared about. Education, neighborhood outreach, mental wellness. She ran a finger over the first page. Lorraine smiled. It's real now. That afternoon, Eleanor retrieved the small cream envelope from the drawer where she first hid the flyer. It was folded precisely the way she placed it on that morning in section 1. She carried it carefully to her mantel. She placed it inside a shallow wooden frame, and hung it beside a photograph of Caleb in his navy shirt. Graduation day. Every object held meaning. Every memory found a home. On Sunday, she hosted a modest brunch. Lorraine set green beans and quiche. Daniel toasted coffee. Marcus brought fresh pastries. Grandnieces and nephews from both sides of the family arrived. Some tentative, but conversation flowed naturally. Childhood stories of Caleb's pranks, his favorite songs, games he invented in the yard, his ever-present corgi that once chewed a slipper off the porch swing. Voices laughed softly. Hearts felt warm again. Eleanor watched the children chase a ribbon between chairs, just like Caleb used to. No one mentioned lawsuits. No one spoke of exclusion. It was real presence, belonging. Later in the quiet of early morning, Eleanor stepped out onto her porch. Dew clung to the petals of lavender plants she'd planted after Section 7's candle. The dawn light shimmered through leaves. She inhaled deeply, feeling something she hadn't expected. Softness. She whispered quietly, not to no one but to all who mattered. I belonged here all along. No applause. No fanfare. Just truth. And now serenity.